The night was wrapped in the velvet hush of the countryside, where crickets sang in the silver, moonlit the world, in a glow that seemed almost unreal, and it was on that night that she found herself, running breathlessly across the meadow, her heart pounding not from fear but from something far deeper, a need that had been gnawing at her soul for weeks, maybe even years. A need that only one man had awakened within her. She had thought she could keep her distance, thought she could suppress the fire he stirred in her every time, his eyes locked with hers. But fate had a way of unraveling carefully laid walls, and tonight was proof of it, because when he stepped from the shadows of the barn, tall, broad-shouldered, his hat tilted low and his eyes blazing like storm lightning, she felt her knees weaken, not from exhaustion but from the gravity of his presence. He moved toward her slowly, deliberately, every step echoing like a promise, and when he reached her, the world seemed to stop spinning as his roughened hand brushed against her arm, his touch igniting her blood hotter than wildfire. Her breath caught and she whispered, "I can't, I shouldn't," though her body betrayed her with its trembling lean toward him. And he smiled that dangerous smile, the kind that made her heart stutter and her resolve melt, and in a husky voice, he whispered, "Angel, don't fight it. You know I'll drive you wilder than midnight fire." The words alone making her shiver as if the night wind had caressed her skin. She wanted to resist, wanted to remember all the reasons she had promised herself to keep away from him. He was too untamed, too reckless, too much for the world she had known. But in his arms she wasn't the careful woman everyone expected her to be. She was alive, raw, burning with a passion that consumed her reason, and when he pulled her close, she could no longer silence the moan that escaped her lips. Her plea trembling in the darkness, "Push harder," and though the words were torn from her without thought, they sealed a bond between them that neither time nor fear could break. He lifted her effortlessly as if she were weightless, and carried her into the barn where the scent of hay and leather filled the air, grounding them in reality even as their world blurred into something uncontainable, and every glance, every whispered promise, every touch between them was more than desire. It was a rebellion against everything that had kept them apart, the rules, the gossiping townsfolk, the chains of expectation, because out here, with the storm of passion between them, nothing else mattered but the rhythm of their bodies and the echo of their hearts, colliding like thunder. She tried to speak, tried to form words that could capture the hurricane inside her, but all she could do was cling to him, nails grazing his back, lips trembling against his skin, while he murmured against her ear, with a mix of tenderness and command that made her melt. "You're mine tonight, Angel, and I'll prove to you what it means to be truly wanted, truly free." And though her mind reeled, her soul surrendered, because for the first time in forever, she was not bound by rules or silence. She was ablaze with the kind of love that felt dangerous and eternal all at once. And as the night stretched on, their bodies moved like wildfire under the stars, their breaths tangling into the music of desire. And when dawn threatened to rise, painting the world in pale gold, she lay against his chest, listening to the steady thrum of his heart, knowing that no matter the battles ahead, no matter the whispers or the dangers, she had found something too powerful to let go, a love that burned hotter than midnight fire and gentler than the sweetest morning breeze. And in that moment she understood that destiny had never been about safety. It had always been about surrendering to the one who made her feel alive. And dear viewers, if this story set your heart racing and left you eager to know what happens when love defies fear and passion, burns brighter than reason, then make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because more unforgettable tales of love, fire, and destiny are waiting for you on this channel, and you won't want to miss the next chapter of this wild, breathtaking journey. The sun rose with a blaze of gold across the wide-open sky, and though the world seemed fresh and new, she awoke still tangled in the remnants of last night's fire, her body pressed against his, her breath steady but her mind racing with the enormity of what had happened, for she knew she had crossed a threshold there was no returning from, and the thought both thrilled and terrified her. She shifted slightly, brushing her cheek against the rough fabric of his shirt, inhaling the scent of leather, smoke, and something purely him. And in that moment, the barn with its weathered beams and scattered hay felt like the center of the universe, a place where forbidden promises had been spoken, where her soul had tasted freedom. But even as she clung to that sweetness, she couldn't ignore the pounding echo of the world beyond these wooden walls, the whispers of townsfolk, the shadow of expectations, the looming reality that someone like him, untamed, scarred by the past, reckless as the storms, could never be the man society would allow her to love. But when he stirred beside her, his strong arms tightening instinctively around her waist, pulling her closer with a possessiveness that sent a new thrill racing through her veins, she realized that none of those fears mattered, not when his voice came low and rough against her ear. "Angel, don't you dare doubt what we found last night." And she turned her face toward him, her eyes locking with his storm gray, gaze that seemed to pierce right into the truth of her. And she whispered back, trembling, "I don't doubt you. I just fear what the world will do to us." And at that his jaw tightened, his voice steady but fierce as he answered, "Let them talk. Let them burn. We'll be stronger than the fire itself." And though it sounded impossible, she believed him in that moment, because the way he looked at her made her feel like destiny had written their names in the stars long before they were born. Still, when she stepped outside later, the bright morning cutting across the meadow, she felt the weight of eyes on her, the judgment already whispering from porches and passing wagons, because the town had always been sharp-eyed and cruel to those who broke its silent rules, and she was certain they had noticed her absence the night before, certain they would draw their own conclusions. But instead of shrinking from it, she lifted her chin, her heart pounding with the echo of his words, knowing that strength wasn't in hiding but in daring to walk into the storm with him by her side. That night, as the shadows deepened and the cicadas sang their haunting song, he came for her again, this time not in the secrecy of the barn but at the edge of the river where the moonlight danced across the water, and he pulled her into his arms as though nothing else existed, whispering against her lips, "Angel, you've got to trust me, because I'll take you places no one else has ever dared. I'll drive you wilder than midnight fire, and together we'll turn every fear into ash." And though she knew the road ahead would be lined with battles, though she could already imagine the heartbreak of families torn, friendships lost, futures rewritten, she surrendered once more, because what they shared wasn't just desire. It was the kind of love that defied reason and rewrote destiny. The night stretched long, filled with whispered vows, stolen kisses, and the kind of passion that left her trembling but stronger, a woman no longer bound by rules but awakened to the truth that she was made for this wild, impossible love. And as dawn came again, painting the horizon with fire, she realized she no longer feared the whispers, no longer feared the judgment, because she had tasted something greater than safety. She had tasted freedom in his arms, and that freedom was worth every battle. So dear viewers, if your heart beats faster for love, that dares to defy the odds, and passion that burns hotter than fear, then don't forget to subscribe right now, because this is only the beginning of a journey where fire meets destiny, and every chapter will take you deeper into a love story that refuses to be broken. The storm that everyone had feared finally broke, not in the sky but in the streets of the town, where whispers turned into sharp tongues and sharp tongues turned into pointed fingers. And by the time she walked through the marketplace with her head high but her heart thundering, she could feel the weight of every gaze pressing on her like invisible chains, the men pausing in their talk, the women drawing their children closer as if her very presence threatened to undo the fragile order they clung to. And though she tried to ignore it, tried to summon the courage he had poured into her veins with every kiss, every whispered vow, it was impossible not to feel the sting of judgment, impossible not to hear the muttered words, reckless, shameless, ruined. Yet even as her pride trembled under the assault, she kept walking, because she knew he would come for her, and she knew their story was no longer just theirs but a rebellion written in fire. Sure enough, by evening, as the sky bruised purple and gold, he rode into town astride his black horse, a vision of raw defiance, broad shoulders squared, jaw set like iron, and the murmurs of the crowd rose like a wave as he dismounted, his boots striking the dust with the weight of thunder, his eyes scanning until they locked on hers, and for a moment all the noise of the world faded, leaving only the thrum of her heart and the promise burning in his storm-gray gaze. He walked to her slowly, deliberately, every step an act of war against the rules that had chained them, and when he reached her, he took her hand in his, rough fingers twining with hers, and turned to face the gathering crowd, his voice low but steady, a voice that cut through the silence like steel. "You can curse me, you can turn your backs, but don't you dare touch her, because she's mine, and I'll protect her with every drop of blood in me. And though gasps broke out, though fury flashed in the eyes of those who clung to tradition, she felt something inside her blaze to life, because no man had ever claimed her not as property but as a promise, not as a cage but as a shield. And the weight of his words made her believe that even if the world burned, they would rise from the ashes together. The sheriff, a broad man with a face weathered by years of keeping peace, stepped forward then, his voice hard as he said, "Son, you're stirring trouble that'll bring this whole town down." But he didn't flinch, didn't falter. Instead, lifting her hand higher as though it were a banner of defiance, replying, "I'm not stirring trouble. Sheriff, I'm stirring truth. And if the town can't stomach truth, then maybe it's the town that needs to change." And though fear prickled her skin, she couldn't stop the rush of pride that swelled in her chest, because she realized in that moment that he wasn't just fighting for her. He was fighting for something larger, for freedom, for love that dared to break the mold of chains forged by narrow hearts. The night that followed was tense, filled with warnings, threats, and the cold edge of isolation. But when they were together beneath the wide sky, he held her close, whispering with the kind of conviction that made her soul tremble. "Angel, no storm can tear us apart if we hold fast to each other. And I swear to you, I'll drive us wilder than midnight fire until there's nothing left to fear." And she believed him. Because even as the town turned colder, even as neighbors drew their curtains tighter and friends vanished into silence, she had found her strength in the heat of his embrace. And every challenge ahead felt like kindling for the fire they would light together. And so, with the odds stacked against them and the world daring them to fail, they pressed forward. Two souls ablaze with a love too fierce to be silenced, a love that made her realize that the only chains that had ever bound her were the ones she had been too afraid to break. And now, with him, she was free, ready to face whatever storm came next. And dear viewers, if your heart burns for love that refuses to bow, if you want to see how passion can conquer fear and how souls can defy an entire town just to stay together, then hit that subscribe button right now, because the fire of this story is only beginning, and the next chapter will leave you breathless. With the power of love that won't be broken,